We've been talking about the split subject. And in our last bit, I mentioned that 1 plus 1 in Lacanian terms does not equal 2. Now here's somebody who associated very strongly science with the mathematizability of a certain practice. Psychoanalysis could be scientific insofar as it approximated formal mathematical practices of representation. That's why you have this very elaborate Lacanian algebra, a series of symbols and signs that are strung together to make formulas, equations, mathemes. 1 plus 1 equals 3 for Lacan. That doesn't mean he's practicing some fuzzy math. I want to illustrate something else there. In the split subject, you have a biomaterialistic self, and you have a sociolinguistic self. There's the part of you that feels something in your bones, and the part of you that then likes to talk about it with others. There's the part of you that is anchored in a human form, in an animalistic body, and there's the part of you that exists on an envelope being delivered by the mail carrier right now. There's a part of you that exists at the level of a social security number that is being stolen by somebody right now and about to be used to open a new credit card. Now let's hope that's not occurring. But in this abstract sociolinguistic field, the field of grammatical subjects, as Lacan puts it, you're all over the place. You are at the level of your license plate. You are at the level of your email address. Right now, you are doing things online. People are responding to you. People are liking images of you, maybe even forwarding an email that you sent. You're going places and doing things right now in the sociolinguistic field that you didn't even know you were doing. So we have these two senses of self, bioanimalistic and sociolinguistic. But 1 plus 1 doesn't equal 2. I said it equals 3. What is this third element? In addition to the bioanimalistic self and the sociolinguistic self, you have a third element, which is the minimum irreducible distance or difference between these two selves that allows them to remain distinct. That's important here. In order to have two distinct entities, even if they're closely related, in order to have them identifiable as different in some way, there must be some minimum irreducible gap or distance between them. Because if there weren't some minimum irreducible distance between them, they would not be two separate entities. We wouldn't be able to separate them, and in fact, they would just be one. And here I struggle to even relay that to you. They would just be one single entity. In fact, there's nothing on my desk, nothing within my reach that I could pick up and show to you and have it displayed as a single, undivided entity. Every effort I would try to show you one of these things would produce in and of itself a gap, a split. This is that third element. The third element that allows us to say 1 plus 1 equals 3 is not entity A or entity B, but the minimum irreducible distance between those two entities that allows them to be identifiable as distinct. Now, in Lacanian terms, that minimum irreducible gap between two entities that allows them to be identified as distinct is represented by the lowercase italicized letter A. Object A is the minimum distance between 2 points that allows them to remain distinct. It is a gap. It is a cut. It is an opening between two entities. Now, when I say that psychoanalysis is distinct from modern science, and when I say that that distinction hinges on what they do with objects, this is what it comes back to. Lacan tells us that psychoanalysis doesn't have anything to do with objectivity. That's the field of modern science. Psychoanalysis has to do with the field of what he calls objectility. which is not concerned so much with objects as it is with openings. Not so much concerned with stuff as it is with causes. Lacan's getting at a very simple and quite profound conception here. In order to have something that could constitute an object of modern scientific inquiry, it must be distinguishable from the field of other things. And in order for that distinction to occur, there must be this third element, this division, this opening, this gap between what it is you're going to be studying, your object, and this field of other stuff that's not part of your inquiry. In order for that distinction to hold, there must be some minimum irreducible distance or difference between the object you're purporting to study, the shoe on the shelf, and everything else that's on the shelf. Now, this doesn't mean that they're 100% distinct. In fact, what we're looking at here is a differential relationship, a relationship between the shoe and everything else on the shelf that is differential. It's constituted by the difference that's maintained between that shoe and everything else, which in turn allows you to call this an object, something object-carry, thrown out for you to examine, to turn, and so forth. That's modern science at work, is turning and examining objects. Lacan thinks psychoanalysis trumps modern science because it's less concerned with the objects themselves than with their cause or their conditionality. The condition of possibility for an object that modern science could study is this opening or this cut or this gap between that object and the field of non-relevant stuff that you're not going to study in this modern scientific inquiry. Lacan, in other words, is not interested in object one and all the other stuff that's not part of object one study. Let's call that two. He's interested in this third element, the division or the opening that human subjects establish between one object and others in order to isolate this thing and allow it to be investigated in the field of modern science. In other words, the modern scientific obsession with objectivity presupposes the Lacanian psychoanalytic concern with objectility. You can't have an object without also having a cause for its emergence in a field of visibility and analyzability. Lacan is concerned with that condition of possibility, which is to say with that cause. And the algebraic term for that cause, because it is always an opening or a division, is little a, this little italicized a. That's the algebraic term that he assigns to cause. And so on page 733, that's what he's queuing up here. The same is true for the split subject. The split subject also has an opening, a fissure, a gap, a division that allows its two senses of self to cohere in a differential relation. That's why Lacan says on page 733, again, object A must be inserted, as we already know, into the division of the subject by which the psychoanalytic field is quite specifically structured. It's inserted into that division or that gap that is inherent to sociolinguistic and biomaterialistic subjectivities. It names that gap, which is why 1 + 1 = 3. There's always this third element that is, again, the minimum irreducible distance between the other two entities that allows them to remain distinct.